Fater of go Coinneach ski the back. And you actually go be Crawford Maclellan. Crawford Maclellan as a follower. Agus anam an hege tan y brwy, yw sy'n ymach gosion an y minach na gael. Wel, ha yn siop coiw deich blwn y ffychyd. Fa gwybod as y fanc ac ein ac ymhir sy'n, a cwtioch ha môr yn garau o siarad y gwybod as yn y naram agus yn y siarad sfech yn y rwioch. With me is Crawford Maclellan, who stays in New Street back in a house called Tyne Brwy. Crawford has been there for over 30 years now. The early part of that, I think he was working in the bank, because I used to see him in the bank, but a big part of his life over these years has been service to the country and been part of the armed forces. He's recently retired from being military attaché to the British Embassy in Bangladesh. If I haven't got that right, he'll put me right himself. Did I get it right, Crawford?
Yes, you got it all right as ever, Kerry.
So, no, let's go back to the beginning though. As your house is Tyne Brwy, that is significant, isn't it?
So that's the village I come from, originally from Argyll. But my family are also from South Uist.
Oh, are they?
So Maclellan.
Oh, the Maclellans of South Uist, okay.
So my grandfather moved from actually Benbecula to Oban, where he was actually my great-grandfather. My grandfather was born in Oban, met my granny, and then just south of Oban is my village of Tyne Brwy. So in a long way I've come back to my roots.
These things are very important to a historical society, because usually I ask people, who are you? And what I mean by that, I don't mean you're Crawford Maclellan, I mean Crawford Maclellan of whom. So you go back to Benbecula then? So
originally the family's from Lochboisdale.
Okay.
At the turn of the last century, great-grandfather moved to Benbecula, ran a small shop there, and then moved to Oban. Shona, about 10 years ago, when I said, I just happened to mention it, and she said, I never realised your family was from South Uist, because I mentioned something about my grandfather. So she did a bit of digging and actually got the family tree done. So I have got it quite well detailed and documented back to about the 1750s.
How many years had you been married then?
Oh, it was about 10 or 12 years.
Before she found out who you really were?
Before, yeah.
So tell me Brwy growing up, what was that like?
A small fishing village. Looking at it, it's very similar to Tabard. So the Gaelic name, House on the Hill. So it sits in a bay, looking south to the Isle of Bute, looking across to the hills of Arran, and then slightly over the higher ground, looking across Loch Fyne to Tarbert. So it's actually very, very remote, and up until the late 60s, was very, very inaccessible by a single track road. And actually, my first year in primary school, myself and another girl, we opened what was called the New Road, which enabled traffic to come from Dunoon and Stracar directly to Tyne Brwy. Previously, most of the travel was actually done by boat.
So that in many ways, you were, although on the mainland, just as remote as we were here.
Oh, more so. When Shona goes down to Tyne Brwy, she says it's more remote than Lewis.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, when I think of Tyne Brwy, apart from fishing and that, I think of shinty.
Well, shinty was very much part of my upbringing. My uncle Barney Crawford was a shinty legend, still is, for Cowes Athletic. So part of our schooling was every Wednesday. We, under my uncle and others, would train in the art of shinty. We would play then between the different villages, between Tyne Brwy outline area, which was mostly a farming community. And so from an early age we played competitive shinty. That moved up then into school shinty, which was across Argyll. Then I started playing for our second team, Cowes Athletic Juniors, winning the Southern Cup first time when I was 16 and second time when I was 18. So I played for Cowes Athletic for about 10 years before moving on with the bank, playing for the police in Glasgow for a very short period. I had two cousins in the Glasgow police. Shinty kind of stopped then between my career within banking and the army. Then moving here, I was very, very quickly drawn to Lewis Cameroch, and I played for them as a full-back in defence for several years, and also a coach from then. And my last time as a Shinty player and Shinty official has actually been with the army. So I played for the British Army at international level. My last competitive game was against the Irish Defence Force, which was at the age of 51. So I was still playing international Shinty at 51.
That's the beauty of Shinty, though, that people do play for it much longer than they do for football and things like that.
Well, yes and no. Competitive, certainly first division Shinty, your late 30s, early 40s is really your cut-off. What normally happens then is you move down to your second team. So it's still very, very competitive. And levels of fitness are now completely different to what it was when I started playing 30 odd years ago.
Let's go back though. School,
primary school, up until the age of 11 in the village. I was actually brought up outside the village on a sheep farm, about 4 miles away, where my uncle Barney Crawford, the Shinty legend, still lives and still farms about 200 or 300 sheep today. I moved into the village when I was 5, so my very early years was actually brought up on the farm. So my first, in fact it would be when I was 6, because initially I did go to primary school my first year from the farm. So at the age of 6 moved into the village, which was then a 10-15 minute walk to the primary school, which is still there. At the age of 11, similar to what happened in Lewis, I moved to Dunoon Grammar, to a hostel, and became a weekly boarder with still friends from Lochgoilhead, Cairndhu, and all the surrounding area around Tynebrook.
So you were one of the ones who came from the mainland who didn't find remoteness a problem when you came up here?
Not at all.
So you mentioned the bank. Did you go into the bank from school?
So no, I was in college and uni for just over a year. I didn't really like that. I actually studied computing in its very early stages. But as it turned out to be, my best man was on a prawn trawler fishing out of Tarbert, Loch Fyne, and he said to me, in between waiting for a job for the Royal Bank, which I'd interviewed for, he says there's a berth in a fishing boat. So I ended up fishing for about a year on prawns, albeit it was registered in Tarbert, so it was actually TT1, Gurlan. We fished out the basin in Crinan. So my weekly commute for about 6 months of the year was through the Corrie Vrecken.
Oh, very nice.
On a Monday and on a Thursday afternoon back through the Corrie Vrecken again, out of Crinan Harbour.
Well, to those who don't know it, Crawford Maclellan is a world famous and at times dangerous whirlpool in the ocean, isn't it?
It's an amazing place to go through, and if you do hit it the wrong tide, basically this fishing boat was doing about 7 knots flat out. The tide was 7 to 8 knots. So you go backwards, if not just stationary. And some of the whirlpools, were quite impressive.
So therefore, when you did get a job with the bank, it was like luxury.
It was, because we ended up in the Clyde in December. That would be 84, because I joined the bank in 85. So the manager at the time actually called me in just when we tied up at Christmas, actually in Rossi, and I wasn't sure if it was. I'd actually waited nearly a year since passing the interview. It transpired about 4 months later when I chased it up. This is when I actually joined fishing. That a school friend of mine had actually got the job albeit I'd passed the interview. So it kind of went back to the back of my mind for a while. So when at home at Christmas off the boat, the bank manager called me in and he said, "What are you doing now?" I says, "Is it fishing?" I says, "Yeah." I says, "Well, planning to go back to sea in January." He said, "Well, how would you like to come to the office instead?" And I said, "That would be very, very good." The reason being is I'd passed the interview, and actually the manager who'd interviewed me, when he knew there was a job in Tynnebrew came up, he says, "Is Crawford Maclellan still in the village?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Like he's fishing." So because I'd passed the interview, there's no formal process. He simply offered the job there and then, which I took. So I joined the Royal Bank in Tynnebrew in January the 4th, I think it was 1985. I then spent my probationary period in Tynnebrew. Similar to the army, after your probationary period, you then moved around the country a little bit to look at different areas, whether it be commercial, whether it be city, whether it be farming, and you'd either specialise in a certain area, but you become more rounded, a bit like a GP as a doctor. You've kind of a bit of jack of all trades, masters in none. But Wishaw had recently had the Ravenscraig closed down by Maggie Thatcher, and the tail end of that was mass unemployment, social decline, and a term that you get occasionally in banks is bandit screens, and you actually needed the bandit screens in Wishaw.
That's to protect you?
Yes. So people would be verbally abusive to you, physically abusive as well, and it was just not a nice place to either live or work in. I was initially commuting back to Tynnebrew to play for Kells Athletic, and then switched to playing for Glasgow Police. And then about a year and a half into the job, I had to make a decision that I just wasn't enjoying Wishaw whatsoever. The bank I found quite tedious to a degree, the job I happened to be in. And I said to the manager, I says, "Look, I'm going to hand my notice in, or could you give me a branch in Oban?" There was 2 branches in Oban at the time. And I thought Oban would just be perfect. And he says, "Leave it with me." He says, "You're normally here for another 6 months to a year." He says, "But if you're going to pack it in," he says, "I'll see what I can do." He came back to me the following week and he says, "Oban, there's nothing coming up for at least another year." He says, "But there's a job in Stornoway coming up in 3 weeks' time if you fancy that." Now, given my family links to the Outer Hebrides, having been in Uist, not actually visiting my old family area, albeit to inspire that actually when Shona dug into my family roots, it was actually in the same area down near the Pollachar. I says, "Well, it'll be worse place than Stornoway." And as you say, the rest is history.
I was just going to say that the rest is history, and you ended up having a career here, getting a wife here, building a home here, and working in the bank for quite a long time. When did the army connection come in? So
actually, it was when I was in Wishaw. The TA, there was a TA unit in Motherwell, which I joined as a soldier. I've always enjoyed the outdoor life. I hunt, I fish from a very early age. So that kind of appealed to me. And if I hadn't been offered that job, possibly I would have joined the regular army anyway. But banking at that time was, I'd say, probably a more honourable career than how it's viewed today as basically selling financial products. Unfortunately, is one of the reasons why I left. I moved from giving advice to forced sales. But the bank was good. As an employer, we had bankers as our chain of command. Our board of directors were all professional bankers. Now they're more salesmen and accountants. But I enjoyed the TA element of that, of just getting out of the office and doing something different. So when I transferred to Stornoway, luckily there was a unit here. Now, see, I joined as a soldier, but before I left Wishaw, and the Motherwell unit said they thought I was wasting my time as a soldier. So I was going down the chartered banker, becoming a professional banker, banking exams route. And they said, basically, we think you should be an officer. So once I got established in Stornoway, I then went down the officer training route, and I was commissioned in 1990 at Sandhurst, and took over Stornoway platoon, where I was previously a soldier, as the platoon commander. So that was in 1990. I had 31 soldiers at the time in Stornoway. Now I think there's 6 or 7, so that's changed days. And that became part of my regular routine, going to the mainland once or twice a month, going in exercises, 2 weeks, as many Lewismen did. Some during the First World War and Second World War went away in their annual camp and didn't come back. Second World War, those that was captured at St Valery, well, they disappeared for two-week camp and came back 5 years later. The TA has changed as his banking has changed. Banking, I'd say, for the worst, the TA for certainly the better. It was, again, going back to those that was in the Royal Navy Reserve and Army Reserve here at Ross Mountain Battery. It was kind of 2 weeks paid leave to go somewhere different and get a bit of extra money. The TA was very much like that when I joined. It was very much that, yes, you were outdoor, you were doing army training, but it tended to be probably more social than a professional organisation. Now, the social element has gone to a certain degree, which is kind of the bar culture. Now, when I see TA units, army units, the bar is really opened. Previously, it was can't wait till the bar opens. I had many great times in the drill hall in Stornoway. Don't get me wrong, but that kind of drinking culture has gone. The reason being is basically the Gulf War. All of a sudden, the threat of the Cold War in Russia more or less disappeared overnight as Russia broke up under perestroika. So the huge army that we had, including a very large TA, were effectively halved. As we are in a situation just now, again with Russia, we find ourselves with not enough soldiers and relying on reserves. What the Gulf showed was that the way the reserves trained, they had to train and prepare for war. Not having a jolly, not taking the Queen's shilling and being at the bar all the time. It meant hard training, and training as hard as you could be to try and be as close to your regular equivalent as possible.
And you actually found out for yourself, there's a good reason for this, because as a TA, Territorial Arms, you can be called up for action.
So my first called up or mobilised period was in 2005. Myself and others, none from Stornoway initially, but subsequently there was another couple of lads called up. So I was mobilised quite early because of my banking background, if nothing else. I was selected to go on a PSYOPS, Psychological Operations course, down to Chicksans, which is the home of the British Military Intelligence. So I spent several months there, learning about info-ops, psychological warfare, and then I was attached to 19 artillery, which are known as the Highland Gunners. So I was posted down to Lark Hill, the home of artillery, expected to meet a bunch of Scottish soldiers. I met 3, I think, out of the whole unit of 600. They'd been in Lark Hill for nearly 20 years.
Where's Lark Hill?
So Lark Hill's in Salisbury. And actually, if you looked out the officer's mess window, you looked onto Stonehenge,
Okay.
which was a lovely view, and a lovely old barracks. It actually backed onto Salisbury Plain, and the type of artillery used was 155mm self-propelled guns, AS-90. So they literally rolled out the camp straight onto Salisbury Plain. I deployed with them as a brigade, 12 mechanised brigade staff officer, but also a tactical PSYOPs team commander into Basra. The role was effectively to return Basra to a state of law and order, reduce the influence of Iranian munitions, IEDs coming into Basra, and bring the locals back on side. So it went from a bit like the Second World War of roses being thrown at the British and NATO troops when they come in. 12 months down the line, all of a sudden people realised that they had their own freedom of thought, and thought we were not those giving them freedom, but now we'd become occupiers. So we received a lot of pushback. Iranian support had given what they call the Mahdi Army, which was the main element, and insurgency element around Basra, a lot of technology, which actually defeated the systems we had, electronic countermeasures. So more or less on me arriving, we started suffering a lot of casualties, and within 2 weeks we had 3 people killed in one incident. And it was my first experience really of seeing operations live, which goes back to the whole point of being professional, and seeing the consequences of, unfortunately, these 3, they're all young lads. There was nothing they could do about it. And that unfortunately continued until we had 12 killed. But my role within the PSYOPs element was to gain atmospherics. Going back to my banking element, it's like marketing. So it's how to influence your target audience. And our target audience was the people of Basra and the surrounding area. Some of those that was fully committed to the Mahdi Army, we weren't going to influence them. But those that were sitting on the fence, so to speak, if we could influence them to give location of a bomb, give location of ammunition, which we did use.
How long were you there?
6 months.
So 6 months there,
Yep.
in a live war situation,
Yep.
back to Stornoway?
Yes, so it was back to banking, and back to the TA. So within the TA, I was quite busy. I moved from being a platoon commander to being the battalion's ops officer based in Elgin, and then subsequently Perth. I then moved to not physically, but I moved my job to Inverness, and I became the company commander with the biggest landmass in the British Army, because I commanded units in Fort William, Inverness, Wick, Stornoway, Orkney and Shetland. So if you look at a map, that landmass is about 1/6 of the UK. So as a major, I commanded a huge area.
In a sense though, you were leading a double life, weren't you?
If you ask Shona, she would agree very, very much. So, and says occasionally that I always used to go in operations every time one in the family was born, so I didn't have to look after the babies or get up at night. But I became more and more involved as I progressed through the ranks as well. And so with rank comes responsibility. And I then looked at doing a second tour, which was very, very different to my experiences in Iraq, where, as well as seeing the effects of war, as in loading coffins onto a plane, personally, I was shot at I was bombed, I was mortared. So physically, I experienced the effects of war. Never ever did I go toe-to-toe with the insurgency, because I didn't want to do that. So they stood off, fired things at us, and lay bombs, which triggered.
Does the training take over, when you are shot, when you are being shot at, when there are bombs going off, where you are seeing casualties?
It is and it isn't. So initially, the first time I actually was ever mortared was just a huge physical and mental challenge, really, a shock. Something got off immediately, pretty close by. I would say, what's happening? And within a couple of seconds, you realise there's alarms going off, and they're saying, you recognise the alarms, because you've been trained what alarms are, to say that's incoming indirect fire, so basically a mortar system is firing on you. You
were in Iraq. Am I correct in also thinking that you were in Afghanistan?
Yes, I was in Afghanistan 3 times.
What was that like?
Afghanistan was similar to Iraq in lots of different ways. Basically, the insurgent, the Taliban, didn't particularly like to go toe-to-toe with us. When I first went to Afghanistan in 2014, we'd withdrawn directly fighting the Taliban and became advisors to the Afghan army. So we removed ourselves effectively from the front line and became more a supporting role than a fighting role. So the Taliban would still very much face the Afghan army, which they were quite happy to engage with and unfortunately kill up to 1,000 a month at one stage. How they engaged with NATO troops was similar to Basra, that they would identify where our bases were, then they would set up mortar and rocket systems, fire rockets, mortars into our bases. They would conduct sniping activities as well. And unfortunately, their traditional modus operandi was the roadside bomb. So we were still taking casualties in Afghanistan from roadside bombs, as we did in Iraq.
You are soldiers, but you are also aware that you're working within political situations as well, aren't you?
Very much. There's a term which is the strategic corporal. So from I asked once an academic on this, a military academic on the strategic corporal. There's been a lot of books written about it. I said, I'll give you an example. There was a corporal who was at a checkpoint with a senior member of the RIA. McGuinness was in the back of a car, and they were going to basically arrest them. And he stood down his patrol and didn't, because basically he knew who he was, he knew the political links he had as well, and didn't stoke the fire. So potentially it would have escalated. So that one corporal making a decision like that had a huge effect. And there's lots of other examples of that, of a junior soldier making a decision that has strategic effect.
So when did you actually leave the bank and go full time to the army?
So my first tour in Afghanistan, 2014, so when I came back from that, I kind of realised that the first job I did in Afghanistan was I was attached to NATO Special Forces. So I was embedded with a US Navy SEAL and Green Beret team supporting Afghan Special Forces. I was a plans officer within SOPLI, which is Special Operations Plans and Liaison Element. And I loved the role that I was doing. It just exhilarated me. I was doing good, I was protecting people, I was supporting wider operations. And there was two particular programmes which I ran, which had a strategic effect. One was I put in place a secure comms system, which was voice and data, out to Afghan Special Forces unit. We called the triples, 222, 333, 204, which meant we could send them what they called target packs. Nothing was over phones, everything was secure. And also I managed to repurpose US electronic countermeasures for roadside bombs and fitted them to Afghan units. For that, I was nominated for the US Bronze Star, which went through official channels and effectively, or finally was signed off by Her late Majesty, that I could wear a US medal with my British ones, which is quite unusual.
Have you got it there?
I have, yeah.
Will you show it to me?
So that's the Bronze Star.
This one here, is it?
The end one.
Oh, the end one, okay.
So in keeping with tradition, all the British military medals are in front of it, and the US one is at the back. I have another 2 US medals from other operations, but I'm not allowed to wear them.
You've got 2 sets of medals here. When I look at them, one, are they exactly the same?
Yes.
Except that one's bigger than the other?
Yeah, so one's a full size, which you wear on uniform during the day. Another one is miniature, which you wear at night on normally mess dress.
So that was first tour in Afghanistan.
So that tour, I did well. I know I did well, and it's really what was I good at? What did I enjoy more? And it was pretty clear that I enjoyed being in the army more than I did within banking. There was another catalyst to that Royal Bank under Fred Goodwin had become actually the catalyst for the fall of the banking system within the UK, that Gordon Brown had to step in and bail out RBS to about the sum of 40 billion. So RBS could have closed overnight, but it didn't, it was saved. But still, within the background, various skeletons started coming out as to why RBS had failed. It was lots of commission-based, it was lots of mis-selling at a very, very high level. And this push into expansion by acquisition, NatWest, so RBS bought NatWest, which was nearly 10 times the size, which Fred Goodwin seemed to be the golden boy, but what he was doing was he was spending other people's money and effectively ran out, and that's what happened to RBS. That kind of said, well, who do I consider a force for good? The British Army and the Queen, as it was then, who I'd sworn allegiance to. I'd far rather, fight for the Queen and country than Fred Goodwin. So,
how did you get an opportunity to go into the army full time then?
So within the reserves, we've now moved away from 2 separate organisations into basically one organisation, which is a full-time element and a reserve element. Something like most organisations have full-time workers and part-time workers. Terms and conditions are exactly the same. So effectively, I moved from part-time to full-time, and that was seamless.
And you did another 2 spells in Afghanistan, is that?
Yeah. So I moved from my first tour in Afghanistan to Saudi Arabia. This was a non-operational tour, but it was on loan service to the Saudi Army National Guard. Saudi has 2 armies. It has historically the Bedouin element of the royal family, so they're aligned to the Saudi royal family, They're seen as being the protectors of the royal family. So they deal with internal security and actual force protection of the royal family. And the Saudi army is more outward looking, which would term conducting expeditionary warfare. For instance, the Houthis in Yemen, that's the Saudi Air Force and the Saudi army that are conducting operations there. So they look out, Saudi National Guard look in. So I was attached to them for 2 years as a capability manager, development manager. So we'd look at any gaps they had and then fill that with appropriate technical systems. More so on the communication side, which goes back to my time in Afghanistan, where I put a secure comm system across the whole of Afghanistan. So I spent 2 years in loan service. I then went straight back to Afghanistan to become Deputy Chief Operations, working at 4-star headquarters in Kabul under a General Nicholson, whose wife happens to own the Lewis Bar.
Is that right?
Yes. I happened to receive a LinkedIn message, which I was very dubious of, to say General Nicholson would like to have coffee with you in the Lewis Bar. This was a year ago. Okay. And I just checked on it, and I said, I don't think the Lewis Bar does coffee. But Shona said, yeah, the Lewis Bar's been bought over, it now does coffee. So I went to Lewis Bar, and yeah, the 4-star American general walked in and said, yeah, my wife owns this place.
And therefore, in terms of controlling crowds in a bar, there would be no difficulty comparing to trying to control crowds in Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, you don't the exact same means, but I did one of my second tour was actually on the UN tour in Cyprus. One of the significant elements of it was the first ever full TA deployment on a UN tour. So we had 362 TA soldiers deployed on a UN mission, which is up Tosca to Cyprus.
There's so much of this I would like to talk to you much more about, and maybe we will do another time. But I want now to jump to your last posting, which sounded to me as being a very interesting one indeed. Did I get it correct by saying that you were a military attaché to the British Embassy in Bangladesh?
Yeah. So a DA.
What does that mean?
So a DA comes either as a defence attaché or a defence advisor. It's exactly the same thing. Similarly, British High Commissions and British embassies are exactly the same things. The difference is, in a Commonwealth country, it's not an embassy, it's a High Commission. In a Commonwealth country, you're not a defence attaché, you're a defence advisor.
So did I get it wrong then?
No, it's still known as a defence attaché in a wider sense, but technically because it's a Commonwealth country.
Well, what's the job there? Is it a behind the desk job more than
no, it's very, very much out and about. The UK and the US were one of the first countries to use defence attachés. So, for instance, the Americans were very interested in Japan, so they had defence attachés that would watch huge battles in Japan. UK, we would have defence advisors watch some of the great battles in Europe. And then it became more formalised that rather than simply observing, becoming advisors. So what was the framework to be able to do that? And the simple one was, if it was an embassy or a High Commission, a military officer would embed themselves in the High Commission and do two things. One, they would advise the ambassador and the High Commissioner. Nowadays it's far easier with communication, but 100 years ago, a defence attaché or a defence advisor would advise the ambassador of a situation and say, this is the military perspective on this. They would give specific advice. Still exactly the same. So, for instance, I would advise, in our case in Bangladesh, as being a High Commission, I would advise the High Commissioner on the military or MOD approach to certain circumstances, certain situations, whether it be looking to support physical assets by flying in planes, or getting ships to come into harbour. That's an extremis, as in we did have a military crew while I was there. So we did have a team come out from our permanent staff, or permanent headquarters, joint headquarters, coming out to look at possibly taking out the embassy staff by military aircraft.
I'm interested in that because I've got an elderly auntie, she's 98, and she came back from Bangladesh in 1970 at the time of the big problems over there. So now, are you retired now?
I've actually still got about 10 days to go, 31st of March.
You go to all these exciting parts of the world, and then you come back to the Polygon, New Street.
That's great.
Is that the way you see it?
I do. So, albeit, yes, I enjoyed my time in many fantastic places doing exciting jobs. But the downside is simply a personal one. As Shona, although she does exaggerate slightly to say you never saw the children grow up, I did, but not as much as I would like. So I'd been effectively away 10 years. So I did 3 tours of Afghanistan, 2 years in Saudi Arabia, 3 years in Bangladesh, interspersed with a year in Somalia as well. I was in Mogadishu for a year working for the Americans again, fighting Al-Shabaab. So I've done a lot of fighting terrorists in my time, mostly with the US.
Well, you're in the right place in the Polygon.
So every time I would come home, it would be, this is another plane I'm on, when am I going to be back? And when I came home from my last job in Bangladesh, I kind of said to myself, this is the last time I come home. I do not need to get on another plane to fly anywhere unless it's going to be on holiday. And that was just nice.
It's fascinating hearing the story. I think we will have to hear more about it another time. But before you go, will you run through the various medals you have here from left to right?
So it starts off with Operational Service Medal, OSMs. So the first one is Iraq. Second one is UN tour in Cyprus, up Tosca. I didn't mention my time in operations in Libya, which was off the back of my time in Basra as a PSYOPs officer. I became Chief of Staff to an Italian PSYOPs officer office in outside Rimini as a NATO job. Afghanistan medal, that is the East African medal. So that's all my operational service medals. Because I've been in the army and TA for so long, I received lots of coronation medals. In total, 1, 2, 3, 4, including the coronation medal itself, 5 in total. So that's the various Jubilee medals plus the coronation medal. I also received accumulated campaign service medal. So basically, you do 750 days on operation, you get an accumulated service medal. I have a decoration, which is the territorial decoration. So it's no longer issued, but the territorial decoration was for TA officers who served 12 years in an officer's rank. Next one is the one that actually replaced it, is the Army Reserve Medal, which is a summertime one. Then the last one is the US Bronze Star Medal.
But as well as these medals, you have other ones here, don't you?
Yes, so as I say, the Bronze Star Medal was authorised by Her Late Majesty to wear. However, I've got medals considered lower in the ranking. This one is the US Meritorious Service Medal, MSM. This was given to me by a US 3-star general in Afghanistan for my work training 20,000 Afghan infantry when I was head of infantry training in Kabul Military Training Centre. And another US, actually, colonel this time, he gave me, get the name right, for operations in Somalia, the Joint Service Achievement Medal. So these two medals I have, and the citations I have, but I cannot wear them officially. I can when I'm retired, but just now, it's still serving, I can only wear my official medals.
Very interesting, fascinating, and thank you very much indeed for talking to me, Crawford.
Thank you very much for listening to me, for all my chit-chat.